Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Vikram SAXENA, who is the founder of Better Commerce, to the podcast. Welcome, Vikram.
Pleasure to be here, Jason. Pleasure
It's
to see
awesome
you.
to have you along for the ride today. We had some technical difficulties. We tried to kick this thing off last week. We had some technical difficulties with audio and a couple of other things, but we finally were able to connect up and make this happen. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you. Now, if we look back at your history before we get into the nitty-gritty of Better Commerce, what you do, how you do it, why you do it, what drew you into the world of e-commerce? Because if I look back across your history, you've done project management in digital and the e-commerce space before. You've also been a founder and CTO of an IT services company before you got hardcore into this Better Commerce thing for nearly the last 9 years at least. So what drew you into the world of e-commerce and made you think, geez, I really love this. I really love this world.
So, Jason, I would just take one step a little bit further back. I basically come from a very humble background and a very average in studies. So I struggled with education, computers, maths. I could not understand a thing about it. And I started my career as a Microsoft Office trainer because apparently people thought I could talk well and I could teach Excel and Word. That's where I started, and I transitioned. Somehow it picked my fancy and I got deeper into it. I did MS Office, then I did MCSC. It used to be a networking certification. And then I got bored of that. And then I said, now I want to learn programming. So I picked up a book which was titled Learn Programming, Learn ASP in 24 Hours. Page 1 to page last, I sat down with that book for 48 hours. And I knew that this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that was the enlightening moment for me. Before that, I was disillusioned. I sold credit cards. I sold boxes door to door, loads of other things, crap that I did for almost a year before I found my calling. Thankfully, I found it. A lot of people spend a lot of time trying to find it. And once I knew that I was going to do programming, then I was just onto it. Worked in the corporate world for about 10 years. During that stint itself, I was based out of Germany for about 3 years, working for a company called Tech Data. And I was part of the team. I was leading the team for development of one of their largest e-commerce platform for them, for their B2B business. So Tech Data is one of the largest organized distributor of hardware and software across the world. And we were catering to almost 150, 200,000 resellers across Europe. And we had built an e-com system for them back then when it was way bigger than Amazon, actually. This was 2004, 2005. And the platform that we built for them was, of course, used by them, and it used to sell hardware, software, loads of configurators, tons of things in there, loads of complications that you can think of in an enterprise technology business. So 3 years I built that, developed it, and then I said, I have to do something on my own. I was tired of the corporate bureaucratic world, and I said, I have to get free from the shackles to build something of my own, do something of my own. I came back to India. I started my own IT services business, and 3 years it was a bit of a struggle. But then I pitched to Tech Data again for one of our very largest product, one of the very innovative projects that they were planning to do. Against HCL, I pitched on that project, which was called supposedly the ESD, Electronic Software Delivery. So if you remember about 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to buy a software, you'd probably go to a store like PC World in the UK, Carrefour across Europe. And you would get a box which would contain a CD, DVD, or a license key written on a piece of paper. So we built a platform wherein we brought a just-in-time kind of a solution, bringing more than 100 software vendors under one platform, under one software. So today, if you went to PC World's website and bought a software from Microsoft, Adobe Symantec, in real time, we would make a call to Microsoft, we would make a call to Adobe, we can make a call to Symantec, get the activation key, license key, and deliver it to you in the browser right then and there. It eliminated the whole need of shipping those boxes. And I still remember about 4 years into that go live, and the Tech Data boss sent me an email, Vikram, and he sent me a picture with loads of trucks in there. He said, you've helped us save all the transportation cost of all these trucks. He just sent me that picture. That was amazing. We maintain that platform even today for tech data. It holds more than 20 million license keys. So if you do a very rough calculation of, let's say, 150 euro or a pound per key, that translates to almost 7, 8 billion worth of transactions processed through that platform. So we built that. It gave us phenomenal amount of confidence. Being a small business, IT driven, technology driven, and being a hands-on person, nothing beats like building something of your own and seeing it's flying in with all shape and colors. So it was beautiful feeling of doing that. But then I wanted to build something more. That was not the end of it. So then we said, okay, if we are doing this for others, why not build something of our own? And we were doing a lot of bespoke e-com websites. We looked around for e-com. The probable options were typically Shopify, WooCommerce, SnowCommerce, Magento. We felt these were all very complicated. Some places, Shopify was really great, but it was fairly small, very simple, but it wasn't designed for enterprise per se. So we said enterprises need a lot more capability than just putting 5 products online and handling that capability. Magento was a nightmare to manage and host and everything. So we went through different options and then we said we'll build something from scratch. So we took about 2 years to build our first version. We registered the company in 2015, released our first version around 2017. Until then, we were doing MVP, trying out with different clients at a small, different scale. 2017 is when we released our first version and we came out with that. And since then, I've just been living, breathing, thinking, eating, drinking, just e-commerce and technology. That's about it. I hope it wasn't too much.
Wow, what an exciting journey. And look, it makes perfect sense. You were scratching an itch. You delivered some software internally inside companies. You delivered some software externally as a vendor and a supplier and a custom software development house, a solutions provider, and then decided, hey, let's productize this. Let's go to market with this, and let's make it hopefully the best product we can based on our experience in the e-commerce world. But what I like about your story more than anything else, I think, is probably the fact is that I think we all come at this from a slightly different angle and a slightly different experience set, and that's what makes our industry so rich and so varied and so exciting and dynamic. And you don't have to come from a specific background to be able to win in this industry, and that's what I really love it. I think it's a really, I think e-commerce is probably the most democratic of the
Absolutely.
IT disciplines is the thing that I love about this. But what I love beyond this is the fact that your experience was primarily in B2B e-commerce. That's where you
Yes.
cut your teeth. And the thing
Yes.
about B2B e-commerce is it's vastly more complex than B2C or D2C e-commerce. It has
Absolutely.
so much more going on. You have digital products, you have physical products, you have services, you have installations, you have scheduling that has to happen, you have license management that has to happen, you have warranty management that has to happen. You're usually through digital keys for warranty management or digital registrations of warranties. You have global and cross-border sales. You have global taxation that you have to think about. You have MOQs that you think about. You have unique price lists depending on the buyer cohort that's buying. You have so many more complexities within the B2B world. And I feel like this maybe set you up for success really early on, better than most, just because if you cut your teeth in the B2C and D2C world, man, the first B2B project you encounter, and I know this was true for me because when I first started out in my career, I was fully B2C and D2C focused. And I tell you, the first couple of B2B projects that I came across were a whole different beast. So I feel like it's almost easier to come from a B2B commerce background and then add on B2C and D2C than it is to come the other direction. And so I feel like you were set up to win almost from day one.
That is true. You opened up so much of cans, all these words that you just said, they bring back so much of nostalgic memories because we used to have so many discussions, multi-currency price list, this customer, and then so many bump conditions, this condition, that condition. These are unheard of in the D2C world or even in small scale B2B world as well. And it's just brings back such a huge gush of memories actually of all those discussions. The words that you just said, it's amazing.
And the other thing I think about B2B is that oftentimes you're integrating to more than one backend
Yes.
system.
Yes.
Oftentimes you're integrating to multiple ERPs,
Yes.
multiple OMSs, multiple WMSs, multiple PIM systems, multiple license key management and technology platforms,
Yeah.
multiple scheduling engines, multiple tech management, implementation management, warranty service engines, replacement engines, upgrade engines, CPQ, platforms, you oftentimes are integrating to so many back office systems. In D2C or B2C land, sometimes you might integrate with an ERP, or you might integrate with an
Absolutely.
OMS, or you might integrate with a carrier aggregator platform to process your orders for you, or maybe one 3PL to ship orders out for you. But oftentimes those back office integrations are significantly simpler and less complex than in the B2B world, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One specific thing is in the B2B world, every customer that you talk to or every integration you do, there is something unique and bespoke about it. What you did in the previous customer, it just doesn't work anymore. No matter they might be using the same software or same, but they have customized it so much to their business that the standard implementations just don't work. So when we design or build anything, we think about it. How broad can we go? What more complexity can come in? And then you start from that. So you start to cater a much broader and a complex scenarios rather than plain simple vanilla things.
And let's jump. That's a really nice segue. Let's fast forward to the better commerce world. Now, you're a headless commerce platform, and there's been a lot of buzz over the last couple of years about headless and composable, etc. But when you thought about building out better commerce, clearly this experience that came from the B2B world informed, or at least I would say heavily informed, what you
Absolutely.
decided to build out as part of the core commerce engine, because you guys have a lot of components in the core commerce engine that you don't always see in the core commerce engine. You've got the e-commerce piece, you've got the CMS piece, you've got the PIM piece, or the product information management piece, you've got the OMS, the order management piece, you've got the analytics piece, and then you've got the marketing components as well. And so it feels, even though, at least in all transparency, never used Better Commerce before, have never done solutioning around Better Commerce before, so I'm just going by what's on the tin, so to speak. But
Absolutely.
if we just look at what's on the tin, it looks as though, even though your platform might be targeted still very heavily at the retail world, it feels like some of the underlying components under the bonnet are very much informed by the complexity of your B2B background.
Yes, absolutely. It is heavily driven and influenced by a lot of B2B capabilities that we've done. In fact, the way we started, we initially built a lot of capabilities out of the box, and then we realized that some of these capabilities might be worth pulling out as independent modules because that is what people were mainly looking for. And to be honest, headless is a buzzword that has been hanging around for some time. But if you really ask me, headless is primarily around doing every capability, offering every feature within the system through an API, where your head is your front end of whatever the customer decides to. We've been doing and building everything with API first approach since 20 years. I don't think it's something new. From a marketing perspective, it may be new, but we built the whole tech data system that we built was built completely API first because we had to cater to 150,000 retailers and they had their own systems who wanted to talk to our systems and in different form and shape. We even built capabilities just to validate and reformat their phone numbers. Today, there's so much available, but even when they were sending their phone numbers, their addresses, all of that had to be automatically formatted to avoid the order rejections and manual processing because manual processing in enterprise when you're doing 10,000 orders is expensive,
You got to throw
right?
bodies at it, and it gets expensive really quickly.
Really fast. So we
And if
designed
we look at your
everything from
customer
that.
base, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. If we look at your customer base, what is the split today between B2B and B2C, D2C? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Is it 80-20? What's the split today who are working with the platform?
So the interesting thing is the customers that we have, they do B2B and B2C both, except one or two customers, they all do B2B and B2C both. And this is why most of the people really like it. Because a lot of times they end up building lots of capabilities that you want in Zoho or in some other platform online, in some other forms that they've seen online because they think one platform cannot do both. But since we came from the B2B world, we'd already built these price list, CPQ,
Customer
quotations, all of
groups.
that, customer groups, all of that, multi-user hierarchies within your customers, account credit capability, all of this is just straight out of the box.
Yes.
So when we
Yes.
see it, and you can enable it in one website. So it's not that you have to build a separate website. You enable it in one experience, and the moment somebody says, I'm requesting for a trading account, that goes through a proper approval process within the backend. So they can approve it. And once they approve it, their journey is slightly different. Their pricing is different. And based on different conditions, the pricing gets dynamically updated in real time.
And are you guys a SaaS platform, an on-prem
Yes.
platform, a PaaS platform, hybrid model? What is your delivery model?
Our delivery model is primarily SaaS, but for larger customers, we also do a private cloud kind of an instance as well.
Right. Okay. So in that scenario, there's single-tenant PaaS
Yes.
basically, and
Correct.
you also offer a multi-tenant SaaS offering. So
Absolutely.
everybody's running the same version of the software.
That is correct. Yeah.
And do you guys offer heads like hosted front ends that are hosted by you guys in addition to your customers building custom front ends, maybe a React front end or maybe a Vue storefront front end, whatever it might be? You guys just say, hey, look, we're going to provide all the back end. We're going to provide the admin UI. We're going to provide the APIs, and it's up to you what head you connect and integrate with our back end. Or do you also provide your own native headless front end that they can get up and running very quickly with as well?
So we've built our own native headless front end. It's open sourced on GitHub itself. So if you go to look up, and it's all built on Next.js. So if you look up Commerce, Storefront on GitHub, it's all there. People can download, and all they need is their API keys and get up and running literally.
But that's not hosted by you. They still need to go worry about infrastructure and hosting.
We can host that ourselves as well. So depending upon the commercial alignment, we can host it ourselves as well. So for some customers, we host it ourselves. Some customers, when they have a significant team, they want to maintain and have much closer control of the changes and much more frequently. So a lot of businesses, when they get to a certain stage, they want to make changes pretty much throughout the day, doing a lot of very powerful A/B testing. And they want to have their front end team doing all of that on their own. So they wanted to have more control. Then they host it themselves. Otherwise, we can also host it for the customers for different sites.
And what was your motivation for, because you've been doing this for almost a decade now, what was your motivation back in the day when you made these architectural decisions around being monolithic or headless? What was the things that you saw emerging in the market? What were the things you saw emerging in the market that told you, hey, we should be going down this headless and composable route as opposed to the monolithic route, because we see something changing. We see something moving in the market around the requirement set. Or maybe it was your ICP. Maybe it was your target ICP that helped define the architecture ultimately that you decided to go with, because there are very successful monolithic platforms out there. And in many cases, and at least in my experience so far, working even with the clients I work with, monolithic is completely suitable for them. Like, there is no drawbacks, there's no limitations for them in a monolithic environment. And oftentimes I find that when merchants come to me and they're talking to me and they say, headless, we think we need to go headless. When we dig under the bonnet, we find that 9 times out of 10, they don't actually need to go headless, and they don't need to take on that additional cost and complexity, because there is a penalty. There's a penalty to be paid in terms of cost and complexity when you go headless. I don't think anybody would argue about that. And in terms of time to value, there's usually an additional penalty to be paid in a time to value perspective in a headless infrastructure environment. And you oftentimes also need some element, even if you've got a very strong agency partnership, oftentimes you do need more internal capability from a technical perspective to be able to own, maintain, deliver, enhance, and extend your headless. And when we think, because oftentimes it's not just headless, right? It's also composable, meaning we've got different components doing different things.
Yes.
So you do need some technically competent people within your business to help understand what that actually means and what the consequences for your business are.
Yes. So, Jason, like I said, our decision wasn't really driven by the market, but primarily by my personal experiences. Because we were building always with the API first approach. Everything was API. We were designed natively, we were trained mentally, subconsciously, whatever you want to call it, just trained to build everything starting from the API. Everything should be available through an API. That was the first thing. Then I also say people tend to forget a very important thing. People say content is king. I think it's not the content, it's the context which is the king, and people tend to underestimate the context. They think headless is everybody's doing headless, so we need to go headless. They should be looking at their own context, what works for them. And they tend to overlook that most of the times. And just like you said, we built loads of capabilities internally within the platform. If you go to the e-com side or the PIM side, there are lots of things which would be typically available in other platforms like an add-on or a plugin or something else, which the moment you take them out, you lose performance control over it. So we designed it from the perspective that we will build these capabilities in the core of the platform to offer a much more efficient management. And we built the platform to the perspective where you don't want to have an army of developers or a technical consultants to manage it. Headless and composable comes with a huge burden of maintaining a huge dev team. And you've got to have a budget. You've got to have a team of 50, 60, 70 people to be able to maintain it and just to keep the lights on, because it is an overhead, significant overhead. So we took the approach wherein we did not want to go, every small thing should not be composable. You have to strike a decent balance in there. Going API route makes sense because it gives everybody flexibility to tune down their or tune up their experiences for the customers, which is the most critical element. They want to change some experiences for the customers on the web PDP, on the checkout. They should be able to do it. They should be able to control it. And the best way of doing that is offering them capabilities through APIs. The moment you start depending too much on third-party plugins or JavaScript apps loading in your browser, your web performance goes for a toss. And again,
yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and this is what I've seen as well. And if we look at across the commerce platform landscape that's in the market today, you've got the Sprikers of the world, you've got the Centras of the world, you've got the Commerce Tools of the world, I could rattle off probably 15 major
yes,
headless e-commerce platforms out there that all do things slightly differently. And then you've got the monolithic platforms that also have a headless architecture that have their native storefront that's served up in a SaaS fashion way. You've got the VTexes of the world, etc. And then we've got the on-prem equivalents, which sometimes they're monolithic, sometimes they're headless, sometimes they're pure composable. So when we look out across this landscape, the landscape is definitely getting, I would say the word is crowded. There's definitely a lot of
very crowded.
competition out there. Like when we move outside the Shopify ecosystem for B2C, D2C, when we move outside that, it's a scrap. You've
Yes.
got the big commerces of the world, you've got the Adobes of the world, and these are just the big name brands, and then you have all the other ones that I just mentioned, which are probably not quite household names yet. And so when you looked out across this world of e-commerce, how did you look to differentiate yourself from some of these other huge platform competitors, and in some cases much smaller platform competitors that have tried to remain agile and do things quite differently to the big boys and girls out there? What would you say is your secret sauce, or what would you say differentiates yourself? What is your unique value proposition out there in this really complex world of platform selection? Because I tell you, a lot of merchants come to me, and one of the main reasons they come to me is because they feel overwhelmed. They come to me and they say, Jason, we don't even know where to start to identify, rationalize, and document our requirements. We don't even know how to do that. Let alone do we know how to engage with vendors and do demos and know what is using, say, for example, the Moscow method, or at least what are our must-haves, what are our nice-to-haves, what are our wish list items. We don't know how to identify those, and we definitely don't know how to identify those in the context of these maybe 15 different platforms we could choose from out there. We don't necessarily even know how to identify what their commercial model is in relation to the needs that we have. So we can't compare things on an apples to apples basis. And so there's a tremendous amount of platform overwhelm out there. And so if you had to put it into a nutshell, what differentiates you guys from the rest of the pack, what would you say that is? Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you. And now back to your listening.
So for that, I'm sure you would have seen there's this MarTech visual, which has exploded over last decade. If you look at it, today, you can't even see the logos. It's become so big and so crowded, right? So we use that in our presentation that the choice has exploded in last decade, which has made retailers' life not easy. It's made it more difficult. And the way we position ourselves, so that's like the Google Android world, where everything is up to you. One of our customers said this to us, you guys are like Apple. You bring the core hardware, software, the core capabilities, the nice to haves, all within one platform without us to being worried about constantly running it and keeping the lights on. We can focus on delivering value to our customers rather than constantly scrambling and evaluating. Let's evaluate this app, let's evaluate this plugin, and let's do this and let's do that. It is all available in one box. And this is why we built, if you look at it, there are very few platforms who do end-to-end commerce stack. So right from PIN to e-commerce to promotions, customer data platform to order management to analytics and AI-based recommendations. Now, all of these, if you look at it, none of these platforms really offer end-to-end commerce stack. And this is where we feel businesses which are overwhelmed, who want to focus on the business rather than build a tech army in-house, we want to target them and we want to make their life easier so that they don't have to worry about it and they just focus on delivering value to their customer. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, one of the things that certainly, at least Shopify has, one of their major go-to-market pillars is the ecosystem that they've managed to build around themselves. And even Harley said recently on a LinkedIn post, there's over 12,000 Shopify apps in the Shopify App Store now. I think there's around 4 or 5,000 in the BigCommerce App Store. Of course, Adobe has its extension library for Magento 2, or now they call it Adobe Commerce. And so it feels like a lot of these bigger platforms in the world that have done pretty well for themselves, it's probably less about just what they deliver individually and the ecosystem or the village that they've been able to build around themselves. Because it's very difficult in this day and age to be an island, right? No man, no woman is an island. And so the reality is it takes more than, no matter how much you might include in your native platform, there are still capabilities that, for example, even if we just look at taxation, global taxation, and Avalara, etc., for example, there are certain specializations within our industry that it is impossible for any vendor to own everything under one roof, and it's almost futile to try. And so it's oftentimes more about what kind of ecosystem can we build around our technology to make it so friendly for both strategic technical partners, but also our customers, agency partners, etc. I'd love to understand what you're doing to build an ecosystem around your platform, because no matter how good and how broad your platform is, you can't do it all.
No, absolutely. Completely agree with you, Jason. So for exactly like that, now tomorrow, of course, payment gateways, PSPs are an integral part of your e-commerce, right? We won't be building our own payment gateway. Absolutely futile to even think of it or try to do that. So we integrate with pretty much 25, 30 payment gateways, the world most popular PSPs. Similarly, email marketing, we would not get into the email marketing world. So we integrate with almost majority of all the email marketing service providers, ESPs as well. Similarly, like you said, Avalara, we integrate with Avalara as well. Now what you've started looking at is exposing APIs are already all available. Plus the platform also supports a native webhook mechanism for partners to utilize all the events and entities to build their own applications on top of it. One of our customers has used our APIs and used it to build a general gross merchandise, a cross common merchandise application on WhatsApp, and which they are using to track sales in an indirect channel, and which is quite a ubiquitous solution if you think about it. What they've done is basically they have people who are selling their product indirectly, and they sell, these general merchants sell products for various other custom D2C brands as well. Now, to able to track that indirect channel sales is almost impossible otherwise. Now, this customer has gone ahead and built an app utilizing our APIs on WhatsApp to capture their sales and push it back into a system, and built an additional reporting system on top of it using a third-party agency. So the capabilities, there is no limit that you can build. It's just you have to find the right use case. And there are scenarios where you might need a generic app. So then, of course, you can build it on your own as well, or you can get a third-party agency to build it for yourself. In terms of building our own ecosystem, we've started now reaching out to partners, onboarding them. We are already onboarding 2 very large SIs based out of India and UK onto the platform itself. And gradually we will build a network of that as well.
Amazing. And when we think about your delivery model and implementation model, if we look at Shopify, BigCommerce, Adobe, whatever, you can't go to them and get them to build you a website, right? You're going to have to go through an agency partner. Now, what I find with some of the smaller platforms in the market, the up and coming platforms in the market, usually they have to do implementations, at least at the start, to seed the market, to prove the market, to generate trust in the market, to generate demand in the market. They've got to be out there both selling, implementing, scoping, enhancing the platform on a per customer basis as required. But what that ultimately means is sometimes that can hold them back from taking on agency partners, because sometimes those agency partners feel like, geez, I'm going to be competing against the platform vendor for implementation opportunities, right? So what is your view on agency partnerships and how important they are to Better Commerce's success?
So the way we look at it is you have to build your implementation playbook. And unless and until you do it yourself, you can't provide that playbook to your agency partners. So this is the learning ground, because when you start building your playbook, that will be the base for onboarding the agency partner. And that's exactly what we've done. We've done decent amount of implementations ourselves. If a customer insists that you do it, then only we do it now. Otherwise, we pass it on to agency partners. And we've started onboarding them. We've got our playbook in place. So we are now guiding them through that process as well and handholding them from behind the scenes. So we don't even go in front unless and until they need a very expert guidance or a solution architect thing, anything that they need more technology oriented. Otherwise, we say, you handle the whole customer, you handle the relationship. We will support you from behind in whatever form and shape you need. That's how we're
Makes
doing it.
complete sense. And how do you guys think about the continued bifurcation of the North American market and the European market? Now, I'm speaking specifically around regulation, compliance, GDPR, privacy, security, all those things. There's a growing bifurcation. And what it means is that a lot of platforms, even like Shopify, even though there's a ton of European merchants that run Shopify, technically speaking, Shopify is not a GDPR compliant platform. Their hosting is all out of the United States. Same with BigCommerce. Their hosting is all out of the United States. And so they are not technically GDPR compliant. In theory, you can be GDPR compliant you can jump through a bunch of hoops to become GDPR compliant on those platforms, but it is not an easy thing to do. And so what we're seeing is almost a two-speed market developing, where a lot of European merchants are going with self-hosted on-prem technology that they can control and that they can host and that they can secure and that they can privatize. And as a result of that, we're seeing just a continued spread between the way that North American merchants and particularly US-based merchants, there is a much lower compliance overhead, much lower compliance costs. In fact, I read recently that somewhere between 1% and 3% of GDP is lost in the Eurozone due to compliance costs. So basically the compliance burden,
Yes,
the compliance overhead, somewhere between 1% and 3% of GDP. That's a
massive number.
handbrake on an
Yeah.
economy. And we look at almost by default, their American counterparts are more competitive just because they don't have this giant handbrake hanging off their back, this monkey on their back called compliance. Now, there still is compliance in the US, but
Yeah.
the compliance framework is a lot more flexible, so to speak. And as
Flexible.
a result of that, tech companies, and that's why still Silicon Valley still leads the world in tech go-to-market, right? And
Absolutely.
that's why the American stock market is what it is, and it helps that the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, and there's a lot of things playing in America's favor. So for all its faults, it feels like America is trying really hard to strike a balance between innovation, right, and regulation. And it feels like Europe has just lost the plot completely. So how does that affect you guys when it comes to your go-to-market and your messaging? And how do you approach going to market in the United States differently to, say, the conversations you got to have in Europe are very different, aren't they?
Yes. In Europe, GDPR is definitely a very big thing across the board. Everywhere, this is one of the most critical element as part of the contracts, as part of any and every discussion, especially the moment you pass the test of, especially after you've passed the test of, okay, this is a good platform. Now let's do the legal due diligence. GDPR is part of every email, every conversation beyond that point. And what we've done is we've built certain controls and practices and capabilities that we give all of those rules straight out of the box as well. So, for example, customers being able to get everything on their own by themselves. Their service desk cannot access the data on their own, but they can make a request and the customer will get a zipped file of all of that information and can be instantly deleted or anonymized within the system. So we built all of that capabilities within the system out of the box, and it's all fully logged across the board. Plus, data at rest is what we've taken care of because we store our data within different zones of geographically. We are hosted completely on Microsoft Azure. So we've got multiple instances of the application. There is one instance set up in Europe and one separate instance in US that we are now onboarding some of our new customers there. So that way we isolate the data and keep the data within the country boundaries itself from that perspective to ensure that at least these basic compliances are always met, in addition to all the complicated ones as well. But of course, like you said, it is always tricky. There is something always changing, and you always have to be on top of it to avoid attracting unwarranted attention.
Yeah, because I tell you, these compliance fines or the non-compliance fines can get pretty big, pretty fast, and they can
Yes,
bankrupt the company if you're not
absolutely.
careful. What is your split like from a location perspective? Where are you finding the most success today? Is it Europe? Is it the UK? Is it the US? Is it Canada? Is it LATAM? Where is it India? Where are you finding the most success in securing new merchants today? And what's your split regional, just broad regional split?
So UK has been our primary area of operation right from the beginning. When we started about 2018, 2019, going out to the market, UK is predominantly our primary space. US, we started just a couple of months ago, and it's all without any active selling or marketing in the US. We've started getting some really good inbound leads. We've started onboarding. We signed a few customers in the US very recently. Europe, we are now making inroads and have initiated some really good conversations as well. But UK is our primary space. India, we've got a few customers as well. But India, I think, is yet to mature from a digital transformation perspective because in India, e-commerce is equal to Amazon, Myntra, Flipkart, and all of that. So marketplaces by default means the e-commerce. It is not the typical e-commerce that is worldwide. In India, it's a different ballgame altogether. I think it's going to be a little while before it matures up from that perspective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when you look out over the next, say, 12, 18, 24 months, what is high on your priority list in terms of features or functionality that your customers are asking for today that you don't do? Or what other gaps in the marketplace around commerce functionality have you identified that you say, hey, we see a gap here that we think we could uniquely fill? And from a development and architectural perspective, what is super high on your priority list to deliver sometime between the next, say, 12 and 24 months?
So what we are looking at is, Jason, we put together, and of course it's a buzzword across the board, but what we have done is we put together a small vision for our AI implementation, bringing that into the part of the platform itself. And that, I think, is going to be our focus for next 12 to 18 months. And what we've done is we put together 3 stages for this. One is where we want to bring in something like a chat GPT for your platform, for your business. So potentially there should be a bot which should answer all the questions that you might have for your own business. So we put together a data model where we bring in your customer reviews, your customers wish list, your customers order history, your product inventory, and your different metrics from the business all in one repository. And then it joins up all of that data, and utilizing machine learning and AI, you can ask questions, which lever is driving majority of the sales, including your Google ad data. Once you bring all of that data set in one place and then start asking questions, it'll start giving you insights. That's one thing that we're looking at for achieving. We've already done a very good, successful experiment on it. Now we're just trying to refine that and potentially launch it in August end or something like that. And then the next stage is we want to get this to a next stage where, let's say, if you want to build a promotion. So AI should potentially tell you what promotion should you be running and when. And not just that, you should be able to tell the chat itself, okay, create a promotion for me. These are the customer groups that I want to target. This is the duration of this promotion. And that chat should talk to my API and create that promotion on its own and just prompt me for any additional information that I may have missed. That's one thing that we are looking at doing. In some cases, it may be suitable. In some cases, it may not be. But I think chat, because if you think about it, how many apps can you have? Chat, WhatsApp, the reason WhatsApp became so successful because it's just one interface. And look at China. WeChat, the super app, does everything.
Yes.
People do everything on that one single app. You don't have 50 apps. And it just makes life so much easier. And that is the idea which we think will make a huge difference to our customers as well. And managing their data, which is a big nightmare, you would know. People maintain their product data in spreadsheets, in Excel files, and it's all spread across various drives, Google Drive, Dropbox, local file storage, everywhere, any emails. Bringing it all together, drawing some semblance out of it. Because at the end, data, if you put a garbage in, it'll throw the garbage out. People are talking about generative AI and we will generate product content and all of that. But to generate all of that, you need to have the basics right. So trying to get that basics right is very critical as well. And I think although it's been long time since technology has been there, a lot of businesses are still struggling to get their basics right.
Couldn't agree more on that one, and I can't wait till the day comes when I can just conversate with my software instead of having to point and click and even type with a chat bot. I can't wait till I can just have a chat. It asks me questions. It gives me answers. We have a two-way conversation. Feels like with ChatGPT 4.0, we're edging ever closer to that reality. It's
Absolutely.
still, I think we're still, I think the biggest issue with AI today is still the mass hallucinations that AI has. The reality is the quality of responses coming from ChatGPT or Claude or any of the others. The reality is AI is subject to mass hallucination, and it's still a major problem. It still gives us erroneous answers. It still makes us believe those erroneous answers are 100% correct because it's so believable. We think it's an oracle. We think ChatGPT and its equivalents are oracles, right? And we think they're almost like God technologies that we're having conversations with, and it's so believable when we get a response. But then we see ridiculous things like what's happening with the founding fathers and generative AI with Google and making black founding fathers of America. It's insanity. And the reality is we're having a clash of worlds, right? We're having the woke brigade, the corporate woke brigade meets all the content across the internet, which is of wildly varying quality and accuracy. And then we have this technology which could be absolutely amazing, but then we're running into those other two issues at the same time. And it's creating an environment where it's really difficult to trust a lot of the open GPT platforms that are out there on the internet. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem. I think these GPT platforms are much better suited for internal use cases like what you describe, as opposed to needing to rely on the open internet of things and of data to be able to generate a response for you. I think working on your corpus of data, working on your customer cohorts, working on your price lists, your restricted catalogs, your unique MOQs, your unique scenarios of shipping, destinations, originations, costs, trying to run your unique promotions. I think when a GPT type technology is working on your corpus of data, you're probably, at least for the foreseeable future, you're going to get significantly better results.
Yes, that's what we're aiming for, because to be honest, like everybody else, I tried GPT for coding and it takes sometimes several hours before you can get the basics code right. Several iterations, several hours. A lot of times you think, I could have written it in half of the time, but you want to explore. You want to try it out. You still want to give it a chance. Okay, let's see. It will give me some basic syntax, but beyond that, it just screws up really bad. And you don't even know if it's going to be performant or not.
That's right. And for you guys, how do you make your money? How do you charge for your platform? Do you charge on a modular basis? Do you charge on a monthly basis like a SaaS platform, and you've got different tiers and subscription models? Do you charge on an annual license fee basis? Do you do it on a share of revenue basis? Like how do you guys make your money?
Our primary model is around the modular plus monthly fee. So depending upon the modules that you want, there will be a monthly fee, and there are tiers that we've defined based on the usage or the volume of the business. That's how we define that pricing model as well.
Yeah, makes sense. And so just give me an indicative so that my audience can know what would I don't know, let's say you're a $50 million a year business and you're B2C and B2C and B2B and you're primarily online. What kind of licensing costs would a business reasonably expect to pay in that kind of environment?
So typically, if you look at it, let's say $100 million business, we would go anywhere about 25K a month, and sometimes it may or may not include hosting, depending upon the overall traffic and the sessions that you might have. So approximately 25K a month for a 100 million kind of a business.
Sure, sure. And I guess it flexes up and down from there.
It flexes up and down depending upon the volume of and value of the business.
Sure. And who do you see as your primary, like when you're out in the market, is it Commerce Tools? Is it Spryker? Who are your primary competitors that you see yourself running across time and time again that you say, hey, look, we feel like these guys they're definitely a challenge for us and we need to continue to innovate to make sure we continue to outcompete these guys?
So one business where we tend to struggle a little bit is Salesforce. It's not doing too much, but it's there and people have loads of complaints against it, but they just don't want to move.
Yep.
They say, like you must have heard, nobody was fired for hiring IBM.
Or
Right?
Microsoft
So,
or
or
Salesforce
Microsoft.
in this instance.
Exactly. Yeah. In this instance, Salesforce. So that's one thing that which we struggle. People will have loads of complaints, loads of challenges, loads of problems, but they cannot move. That's the biggest hurdle that we tend to cross. In terms of competitors, we come across a lot of commerce tools and significant terms when it is D2C businesses, a lot of times it's Shopify.
Yep. Makes complete sense. And look, it's going to be interesting to see how Salesforce's migration to Lightning and trying to move all of this is trying to standardize their architecture on the Lightning architecture. It's going to be interesting to see how many gaps this opens up for competitors in the meantime, because this is a massive architectural shift for them to try to standardize.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely, it is. Looking
Well,
forward
listen,
to
mate,
that.
this has been a fantastic conversation, Vikram. I've seriously enjoyed this. If people want to get a hold of you and they want to talk to you more about Better Commerce or just have a chat about commerce full stop with you, I will drop your LinkedIn link directly into the show notes as well as the Better Commerce link in the show notes. But other than those two places, how is it best to get a hold of you and have a chat about technology, e-commerce, headless, whatever?
Just drop me an email, vikram@bettercommerce.io.
Wow, that's easy. That's easy. Vikram at bettercommerce.io. You've got one of the golden emails. I guess as the founder of the company, it makes sense, right? You got to have the perfect email. Fantastic. Listen, now we're at the time of our conversation. An hour has absolutely, or nearly an hour has absolutely flown by. It's been a great conversation. Unbelievable. But this is the chance for me to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question. Any question you like, could be personal or professional. So, Vikram SAXENA from Better Commerce, what is your question for me today?
So, Jason, what inspired you to start this podcast?
Great question. And look, there's probably two primary reasons. One is when I looked out across the pantheon of e-commerce podcasts in the marketplace, there's a lot of very successful top 10 podcasts in the world. Some of them were in the technology sector, business sector, entrepreneurship, e-com, digital, omni-channel, and most of them, the most successful ones were very heavily focused on digital marketing and merchant stories. And my background and my focus has always been more the technical and operational components of commerce. And as a result of that, I didn't really see anybody out there producing content that was really targeted at somebody like me. And so I thought, geez, if nobody else is going to do it, why don't I do it? Now, there's been a few that have cropped up since, even The Operator. It's literally called The Operator's Podcast. There's been a few that have popped up since I started my podcast in 2016, and even earlier, I was producing content around this. But when I first started my podcast, there was really no one talking about this stuff. And so I wanted to produce content that I would love to consume. And I felt like with my background and my experience, I could do something that was slightly different to what was already existing in the marketplace. The second thing was a little bit selfish. And the selfish bit was when let's say you're cruising around LinkedIn and you see someone interesting or they're doing something interesting and you maybe want to have a chat with them and learn what they're doing and maybe learn some things from them and maybe share ideas. If you just slide into their DMs and say, hey, let's grab a virtual coffee, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say no because they feel like you're going to sell them something or you're going to try to pitch them or something, or you're going to try to get them to invest in your thing or whatever it might be. And so it's very difficult to have conversations with experts in our field just by reaching out cold to them or sending them an email or trying to get a friendly introduction or something like that. It's just really hard. But once you have a podcast, and especially once you get past 100, 200, 300, 400 episodes, you now all of a sudden, you're credible, right? And
Yeah.
you've got a track record that shows, hey, you're not fly by night. I've been in this industry over 20 years now. The podcast is nearly 400 episodes now. So I've got a little bit of credibility out there now that allows me with confidence to reach out to people like yourself, subject matter experts in their field, and say, hey, I'd love to get you on the podcast. I'd love to have a conversation. Here's the page about my podcast. Here's my bio. I've got enough credibility in the market now that I can have these conversations and people will actually say yes to me. Whereas having a podcast, even though I had a lot of experience in the industry, most people would say no. And so there was definitely a selfish element to this. And then the final piece is hopefully the idea behind this is to establish my own credibility in the marketplace so that if somebody is looking for the types of services I provide in my business, that also provides a little bit of credibility and they can learn a little bit more about me before they ever reach out to me. And that seems to be working well. It builds a level of credibility in the industry that it's hard to get any other way.
That's absolutely amazing. How much time did you take to cross your initial 100 episodes and build some credibility around that?
Look, the first 100 episodes, I was only doing one episode a week. In fact, I was hit and miss for the first almost 2 years. I was very occasional. I would be consistent for a while, and then I'd drop off, and then I'd be consistent for a while, and then I'd drop off. But really in 2017, 2018, I started to get really serious about this podcasting thing. And I started to be really hyper consistent every Friday. I moved to more of an interview format as opposed to a solo format. That worked really well for me because I think I'm pretty good at having great conversations with really smart people and hopefully asking really smart questions that my audience would like to know the answer to. And I think it took me about 2.5 years to get to the 100 episode mark. Then once I got serious about it, then it just rocketed from there because at first I only had the tech episodes, which were the Friday episodes. Then I added a mentorship episode, which now comes out every Monday. Then I added B2B episodes, which now come out every Wednesday. So most weeks, I'm dropping 3 episodes a week pretty consistently. And so it really accelerated those numbers. Once I moved to 3 episodes a week, it really accelerated those numbers.
Wow. That's quite a bit of an effort and time going into this. How much time do you spend on each episode?
I spend across all content, including the podcast, I spend between 6 and 8 hours a week just on content.
I can imagine.
It's basically 1 day a week. A week. But I look at this as part of my job. I look at this as part of the marketing effort of my business. It's part of hopefully being a thought leader. It's opened up opportunities to speak at events and conferences. It's opened up opportunities to take on partnerships that I would have never been able to take on before. The benefits are almost incalculable, even if I can't tie them specifically back. Oh, this client came because they listened to 3 podcast episodes. Even if I can't say that, the total halo benefit to my career, it's difficult to count the benefits that it's brought to my life. And the lifelong friends that I've met and made through the podcast as well as I've traveled the world, started out in the United States, lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, now living in Mexico for the last 2 years, a year and a half. It's opened up opportunities to meet people that have been life-changing for me. And so the value is really incalculable, to be honest.
That's quite incredible. Congratulations for achieving this feat.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Listen, Vikram, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time. I can't wait to speak to you again soon, my friend. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.